Hey kids, do you know the story of Annie the orphan? It's been made into a movie, a play, musical. Well, now I have the book called Annie. It's based on the original story by Thomas Meehan and adapted by Bonnie Bader. There's Annie. Annie was a little girl with curly red hair. She did not have a mother or a father. She lived with other girls who did not have parents. They were called orphans. The orphans lived in a house with Miss Hannigan. Miss Hannigan was very mean. She made the girls work hard. They had to scrub the floors. They had to clean and clean and clean. Annie did not like all the hard work. She missed her real parents. Annie had half a locket from her parents, and she had a note that said they would be back to get her soon. She was sure her real parents would come back to get her one day, but it had been 11 years, and Annie's parents had not come to get her, so she decided to go find them. One day, a man came to pick up the laundry. Annie climbed inside the bag and hid. The man went outside. He put the bag in the back of his truck and drove away. Annie was free. Later, Annie climbed out of the bag and out of the truck. On the street, Annie found a dog. "Oh, poor boy," Annie said to the dog. "He didn't have a home either." Suddenly, a policeman came up to Annie. Annie knew that the policeman was after the animal. "Isn't that dog a stray?" he asked. "Oh no, he's my dog," Annie said. "So what's his name?" the policeman asked. "His name is Sandy," Annie said. The policeman did not believe that the dog was really hers. "Let's see if he answers to his name," the policeman said. Annie was scared. "Sandy," she called. The dog came running. The policeman let Annie keep the dog. Annie now had a dog and a friend. But then Sandy ran away, and another policeman caught Annie. She was taken back to Miss Hannigan. Miss Hannigan was angry that Annie had run away. She yelled and yelled and yelled at Annie. But then she stopped. Someone was at the door. It was a woman named Grace. A rich man named Mr. Warbucks had sent her. He wanted an orphan to spend Christmas with him, and Grace picked Annie. Annie said goodbye to the other orphans. Grace took Annie to Mr. Warbucks' house. It was big and beautiful. "Annie, what do you want to do first?" Grace asked. "The floors," Annie said. "You won't have to do any cleaning while you're here," Grace said. "I won't," Annie said. "You are our guest," Grace said. Mr. Warbucks came home. Annie was happy to meet him. He told Grace to take Annie to the movies. Annie was sad. She wanted Mr. Warbucks to come too. "I'm afraid that I will be far too busy tonight," he told Annie. But Annie would not take no for an answer. At last, Mr. Warbucks agreed to go. And they all had a wonderful time. Soon, Annie and Mr. Warbucks were going everywhere together. Mr. Warbucks wanted Annie to live with him for good. He bought Annie a present. "It's a silver locket," he said. "I saw that old broken one you always wear, and I said to myself that I would get you a nice new locket." Mr. Warbucks tried to take off Annie's old locket. "No, please don't make me take my locket off," Annie cried. She told Mr. Warbucks that the locket was from her parents, and she told him that they were coming back for her. "I'll find your parents for you," Mr. Warbucks said. Mr. Warbucks and Annie went to the radio station. They said that Mr. Warbucks would pay a lot of money if Annie's parents were found. Back at Miss Hannigan's house, the orphans heard Annie on the radio. Miss Hannigan heard the news too. Just then, two people came into Miss Hannigan's house. "Are you the lady who runs the place?" the man asked. "Yes," Miss Hannigan said. We had to leave our baby here," the man said. "Our little girl Annie," the woman said. "You're Annie's parents?" Miss Hannigan asked. Then the man shouted, "I got you, sis. It was Miss Hannigan's brother, Rooster, and his friend Lily. They had a plan to trick Mr. Warbucks. They wanted Mr. Warbucks to think that they were Annie's parents. Then they would get the money. They did not care what happened to Annie." A lot of people said they were Annie's parents, but they were all fakes. Grace told Annie that all the people wanted was the money. "You did your best," Annie told Mr. Warbucks. "If you can't find them, nobody can." Mr. Warbucks knew he loved Annie. "Annie, I want to adopt you," Mr. Warbucks said. "If I can't have my real mother and father, there's no one in the world I'd rather have for a father than you," Annie said. Mr. Warbucks had a big party on Christmas Eve. He was happy that he and Annie were together at last. During the party, Rooster and Lily came in. They were dressed up as Annie's parents. They had a paper that said that Annie was their child. And they had the other half of Annie's locket. It was a perfect fit. Annie's parents were found. Rooster wanted to take Annie right away. "What about the money?" Mr. Warbucks asked. "Money?" Rooster said. "We don't have much, but we can give you some." Mr. Warbucks shook his head. He told Rooster and Lily that he was giving them money. Rooster and Lily said they did not want his money, but they were lying. "Can Annie stay here until the morning?" Mr. Warbucks asked. "Then you can come back to pick up Annie and the money." Rooster and Lily really wanted the money, but they said it was okay, and they left. Mr. Warbucks wanted to get back to the party. "We have just had the best news," he said. "Annie has found her mother and father." But Annie was not happy. She ran upstairs. In the morning, Annie was ready to leave. She tried to put a smile on her face, yet she still was not happy. She did not want to leave Mr. Warbucks. Then Mr. Warbucks told her he had some news. Annie's parents had been found. She did not understand. Her parents were already found. Mr. Warbucks told Annie that the people who had come were fakes. "Annie, your mother and father died a long time ago," he said. "So I'm an orphan after all," Annie said. Annie knew that her real parents had loved her, and she knew that if they were still alive, they would have come back. Now Mr. Warbucks could become Annie's father. But first, they had to find out who the fake parents were. Mr. Warbucks found out the truth. Rooster and Lily had faked the papers, and Miss Hannigan had told them about the locket. They were all sent to jail. But what about the other orphans? Mr. Warbuck said they could all live at his house. Annie was so happy. Mr. Warbucks had one more surprise. Sandy! Home at last. Yay. The end. That was a happy ending. Hope you enjoyed the book. Love you guys.